Dear commissioners, dear guests, dear students, dear colleagues, dear citizens, good evening and welcome to this citizens dialogue. Welcome on behalf of the rector of the College of Europe, Professor Mona, who had to excuse himself for tonight and for whom I'm standing in here. For this citizens dialogue entitled The EU and the Fourth Industrial Revolution / Evolution, Opportunities, Challenges and Blind Spots, we have the privilege of welcoming not one, but two acting European commissioners. That is indeed a privilege, and I would like to invite you to seize that opportunity to engage with the two commissioners on this very important topic, a topic that will decide on the ways we are going to live and work in the decades to come, and this at a timely moment because, as you know, we are in the run-up to the European Parliament elections in a couple of weeks' time. So it's indeed an honor and a pleasure to welcome the two commissioners here to the college. Thank you very much for choosing the college for this dialogue. Two commissioners who have exciting portfolios, and before passing the word to them for this dialogue, or rather trialogue, really, here tonight, I would like to use the opportunity, and even though I guess they are quite well known, to at least briefly introduce them. And I will do that in alphabetical order, starting with Commissioner BULC. Commissioner BULC is the Commissioner for Transport in this College of Commissioners. She previously served as Minister responsible for development, strategic projects and cohesion, and also Deputy Prime Minister in her native Slovenia, and has extensive experience also in the private sector, especially in the telecommunications domain. And this is maybe interesting for our students. She holds degrees from the University of Ljubljana in computer science and informatics, and another degree from the Golden Gate University in San Francisco in the US in information technology. So she's indeed very well placed to speak about the subjects also from that perspective that are on the agenda tonight. And then I would like to introduce our second guest, Commissioner VESTAGER. As many of you will know, Commissioner VESTAGER has a portfolio for competition policy, and she previously served as a member of the Danish Parliament. She was the leader of her Danish Social Liberal Party and the Minister of Economic Affairs and the Interior of the country she knows best. And she holds a degree in economics from the University of Copenhagen. And we're very happy to have you here. I pass the word back to my colleague, Professor Settembri, to moderate this trialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Commissioners, without further ado, you have a responsibility in two policy areas, competition and transport, that are or will be at the core of the fourth industrial revolution. What is your take? What are your opening words at tonight's dialogue? Please, Commissioner BULC, you go first.
Hello, everyone. And first, of course, thank you very much for this opportunity. I've been here before, and I know how exciting it is to engage with the dialogues, especially with students who know probably more about European institutions than I do. Of course, these questions and comments are challenging, but I see a lot of also professors and even representatives of local community. Why did we put this topic on the agenda? Very simple, because personally, I do believe that the fourth industrial evolution is here. And it will change the way how we perceive society. It will change the way how we perceive relationships. And probably it will change the way how we perceive our attitude to life and death. And I think it's an extremely important topic to be discussed in all circles, because it is our responsibility that we give the spirit to this industrial revolution. And it is up to us to decide and impact the way how we're going to use it. Will it serve a society? Will we put the human beings and our civilization at the center? Or we will become dependent on this technology that will be mastered only by few. So today we are deciding, will this industrial revolution and all the tools that come along support the future democracy, open society, engagement, bring the world even closer together, or we will give up on that and enter in a completely new social structures and social welfare where those that will privilege, that will have access to the technology, will govern the rest. This is where I would like to invite you to steer today's discussion, and I'm sure that Margrethe and I will be more than happy to respond to your challenges and have an engaging dialogue with you. Thank you very much.
And just taking it from there, a couple of examples of how we see what is happening around us. Last year, we had a couple of agrochemical mergers. It was the Dove-DuPont merger, it was the Bayer-Monsanto merger, it was the ChemChina-Syngenta merger. And one of the things, this is about agriculture. This is about seeds and pesticides. So what has that to do with digital technology and biotech and data? Well, it has everything to do with that. Because seeds cannot be manipulated, not sort of in the old school gene modification way, but now in new ways that are less intrusive, but yet has to be dealt with by changing the traits of seeds. And the machinery that you will use for farming will produce data whatever they do. They will collect the data of the weather, of the quality of the soil, of how the seed responds to different kind of treatment. And the equipment will give advice to the farmer to say, well, now you should do this, now you should do that. And imagine what happens when harvests fail, because the farmer did something else than what was suggested by his machinery. What will then the bank say? Will they say, well, you're yourself responsible because you took an independent decision instead of doing as the data told you to do? And this is a very, very traditional trade, to do agriculture. And yet, data will become one of the steering parts in that as well. And of course, we know it very, very well from our social media life, from e-commerce, from how it has changed city centers, that now people may go look for physical products, but very often they will just buy them online and have them home delivered. And while doing so, it will be suggested to them what to buy next, dependent on their behavior, what they have been looking for, how much time they have spent on a certain page, what apps they have had open at the same time, all that data being harvested to be able to propose the next product, the next service, or the next political opinion. I definitely don't think that we are at the end of this industrial revolution, because we haven't seen the full play out of Bitcoin technology, of quantum computing, of sort of biosimilars in drugs. And this is, of course, why our democracy now will have to gain speed in order to be able to give our society direction. Because otherwise, as Violeta just said, there's a high risk that we will just be the flesh and blood part of a huge machinery with very little sense and very little control of what is actually going on. And this is why we have been working intensively in this mandate, for me, with my competition cases, the 3 Google cases, the Amazon case, the tax cases. We can talk about that as well. Colleagues who have been sort of the masterminds of digital citizens' rights, of new ways of protecting consumers when doing shopping online, with the platform to business proposal to give businesses who rely on platforms new rights in order not to be fully dependent on the platform. You know, legislation to start sort of shape the society in this revolution as well, just as it happened in the first and the second and the third industrial revolution. Because it also took some time back then when the steam machine was invented before we really got in control of what kind of society we would want to have with these new powers. But the challenge compared to those days was that now both the speed and the scope is so much more impressive, which means that we have a lot to do and we will only master it if we do it together. So, welcome. Now it's for you to challenge us and to give us ideas as to what direction should we take.
Thank you, Commissioners. Okay, we have a question on Slido to take the temperature of the room on the fourth industrial revolution. I think you've all now been initiated to Slido. So according to you, which word describes best the fourth industrial revolution? The vote is open. For those who arrived after the test, please join at slido.com and hashtag EU19 to enter the room.
All right, a lot of you voting. That's great news.
Okay, I think we have a quorum. Commissioner Vestager, you go first this time for a reaction to these words.
I find that it's quite impressive. My first response would be, I would think we are already at the end of the free internet because it has become very much a commercial space compared to what it was initially and what at least I was one of the ones who hoped that with the internet one could create a global community where everyone would be able to participate. But it had turned out to be a rather commercial space and also a very hostile place to be. We find there are more and more reports, in particular of women, who says that they will not take part in social media because the harassment is so intimidating that it's much, much worse than in direct interaction. And the challenges, that is the most obvious thing. I would think that there are a number of promises or opportunities that ought to be more present. Of enabling things, enabling better transportation, enabling curing diseases, enabling sustainability. I think it will be very difficult to transform our societies to fight climate change without digital technologies. But only, of course, if we trust them. And if we only see the negative sides, well, we have to figure out how to trust digital technologies to help us when we need their help in order to do the transition.
Commissioner BULC, please.
Thank you very much. And I will build on what Margrethe said. And I will challenge you a little bit with saying there is no way that there is the end of internet. Why do I think so? Because internet is the most democratic tool ever invented on this planet Earth. Has been misused? Yes. Has democracy been misused? Yes. Yeah, many times. So I will try to do my best that we keep this very open, very interactive global network alive. But I need you. We need you. Because we need to defend democracy at every corner. And we need to make sure that, of course, internet is not misused. As Margrethe said, there is a lot of fear related now to internet because there are all kinds of activities happening and it's been misused badly in social media. There's been a lot of fake news. And of course, the trust in this, the most democratic tool, has been lost a little bit. Because there is so many good things also still happening because we have this powerful tool. And I would invite you that when you work, when you think, when you engage, that we bring these issues to the table, that we don't avoid discussing them, but keep this incredible tool alive and don't lock it. Don't make it profitable in a sense that you will restrict access to it, because that is the end of global connectivity. That is the end of free engagement, sharing of good ideas, that they can flow and inspire people all over the world and bring groups of people that think alike in a way that has never been possible before the internet's been invented. Yeah? Today you can connect with people who think like you, who want to inspire others, who want to start something fresh and new, because we have these tools. And as Margrethe pointed out, Commission is trying hard in order to create conditions that this can be done, to prevent misuse, to prevent the crime, to really help citizens to stay engaged. And the fourth industrial revolution is using connectivity as the basis for its functioning. Internet of Things, connecting everything, allowing artificial intelligence to take over certain activities and to help us, hopefully, because of the Margrethe and her work and the work of her team. We, in the portfolios that use the solutions as the delivery solutions, because of her work, we are confident that this will not be misused. The future of mobility is autonomous mobility. Will never be happening without Internet of Things, without the concept of full connectivity. But of course, we will be very careful before we will allow the full autonomous mobility to take place, because we need to make sure that it's not misused, that lives are protected. Because if you sit in the car and you trust technology, you need to be able to trust it to the point that will not endanger your life. We're talking about life. That's why there's going to be a lot of discussion before this will become a real day-to-day reality and not just a testing bed. And I would just like to address one more issue, which is unemployment. Many scare people that the new industrial revolution or evolution will bring full-fledged unemployment. Margrethe mentioned steam engine. Yes, some jobs were lost with steam engine. Some jobs were lost when electrical motor and propulsion systems came on board with the second revolution. Some jobs were lost when computers came with the third revolution. And some jobs will be lost when this full-scale fourth industrial revolution take place. But many new will be created. Many new ideas will flourish. Many startups will pick it up and employ hundreds and hundreds of people. So instead of being afraid that many would want us to be, let's be inspired. Let's be curious. And let's make sure that no matter what kind of technology we introduce, it keeps the human face alive. It puts humans in the middle of this revolution, and we really talk about how to satisfy the needs with it and not how to misuse and deprive humans from who we really are. Dignified, engaged, curious, and extremely creative beings.
Thank you, Commissioner. This was a question about perceptions and descriptions of today. Let's move a little bit at the expectations, also a little bit more of a political question for the future. Before we open the floor to questions from the public, let's take this other question. What do you expect from the fourth industrial revolution? Okay. Let's agree that 50 is the quorum so that we can move on. Commissioner BULC, is now for you to take this question first.
Well, I would love to discuss the fourth most commonly entered element, but this is Commission Citizens Dialogue, not political rally. So I will skip that one, but if I could, of course, I would be very much in favor, but I can't, so let's move on. So I would rather address the subject of sustainability, because I do believe seriously that if we put our hearts, our love for life, our love for the planet into our hands when we think about all this incredible capacity of technology that we have, we can actually build a really new civilization. I call it eco-civilization, that is based on sustainability, that is based on many incredible topics that you raised here, and they bring positive vibe and the future to our planet and our society. But it is our choice, your choice, your choice, your choice. Yeah? It is our choice. Come on. The cars, the buildings, the tables in the classroom, they will not design the future. Who designs the future, sir? Exactly. There is nobody else. The animals follow. They cannot make this kind of decisions. Plants just wait for our wisdom to come through, that they can engage with us into this incredible sustainable society. So yes, I do personally believe that if we do the fourth industrial revolution right, this is exactly where we're going to be heading. And keep in mind, when you think about it, keep in mind about new eco-civilization that is emerging in order to serve the global community. And that would never be possible without full-scale connectivity, which the fourth industrial revolution is all about. Margrethe, to you.
I may have to challenge you just a little, because I am completely with you on being being inspired and optimistic and all of that. Now, this is a commission meeting, but I think a little drizzle of fear is also a thing to keep us alert, because some of the things we're dealing with, they are really scary. And in order to get, I think, the courage and the persistence to do something about it. I think just that little drizzle of fear that we might get it wrong, I think that's a healthy thing to have on board as well. Because these are very strong powers that we're dealing with. If you look at the interest in some of the legislation that is making sure that not all the revenue is going to those who are sort of the natives of the digital world, you see there's a lot of opposition when it comes to sharing. We made a proposal on copyright, so that also copyright understands a digital world. And the idea was very simple. If you make money by showing people something that other people have created, you should pay these other people, because otherwise they will stop creating. And maybe our first proposal wasn't perfect, so it was discussed with Council and Parliament for a year, but now we have a proposal that will make sure that there is a shift so that not just all the monetization goes to those who makes the commercials. Well, I go to YouTube for the commercials as well when the FNL final has been played to see who are the 5 commercials where they paid, I don't know, trillions to place them. Otherwise, I don't go there for the commercials. I go there for content. I go there for satire. I go there for tutorials for makeup for women over 50. I go there for content. If you look at the discussion about how, you know, revenue could be shifted into some of those people who actually provide content, you would see some of the powers that we're dealing with. And this is why just a small drizzle of fear to give the necessary respect in order to get it right, I think that is needed. Because there are a number of words here that also addresses some of the things that we have ahead of us. Inequality being one of the most obvious. And here, not just inequality of money in your salary, but also inequality of resources and access to opportunity. Because if we are in a world where you are illiterate when it comes to figuring out how to interact with technology, you really have a new form of inequality in front of you. Because then there is a high risk that no matter how much we try to make technology human-centered, to serve us as humans, we are still not equal. And the second thing is, of course, that basically we shouldn't have artificial intelligence until we have an equal society. Because as artificial intelligence is made right now, it just reproduces the biases of the society we have already. And that is kind of awkward in the society we live in. Because 1/2 of the population, that be women, do not have the same opportunities, and many, many minorities do not have the same opportunities either. Of course, I'm not as clever as Violeta when it comes to digital technologies, but as far as I've learned, garbage in, you get garbage out.
Indeed.
Whatever you do, it's never better than the data you feed it. So we have things to deal with when entering into a world that is characterized by these new technologies, and that is at the same time to transition our society into a society that is much more diverse and that allows both genders or any gender for the diversity. And when we talk about gender equality, this is also discussing what are the opportunities for men. Because when you break the uniformity in how we look in a group, you also break the uniformity in thinking. And this is, I think, what we need in order to make full use of the technologies coming with the fourth revolution.
Thank you, Commissioners. Now, let's make this meeting a real citizens' trialogue. I like a lot the expression of Simon. Let's open the floor to questions.
You can type it.
Otherwise, I will call, as the professors do. So. Any volunteers, please?
I'll be talking about the dangers of
Thank you very much. May I suggest that we take a few questions? Or I saw the hands of a former commissioner that wanted to ask a question. I don't know if it's still the case. Maybe not yet. Please.
Thank you for the presentation. Mrs. Vestager, you were talking about data. In Germany, there was a case from the Bundeskartellamt going after Facebook via competition law by, in the end, actually enforcing data protection by competition law. Do you think this is something the European Commission should also do, especially by competition law, because there you have the competence?
Okay, let's maybe take a third question on data, if there is one on... Okay, please.
Hello, thank you for a very interesting topic tonight and for the debate so far. A couple of weeks ago we had Guy Verhofstadt here, and he brought the issue of the fact that there are very few successful European companies online. Currently about 4% of the global online platform market is held by European companies. So there are some exceptions, for example, SAP from Germany, Spotify and so on, but they are really exceptions. So my question is, how does the EU promote new European champions? Perhaps, especially being a commissioner of competition, it would be interesting to have that perspective as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I suggest that
start?
Commissioner Vestager goes first. Thank you.
On the GDPR, well, someone has to start, because if we wait for agreement on the entire world, I think we will completely lose the necessary momentum. Because now we have had our digital citizen rights, that we own our data, the right to be forgotten, the right to take our data and move them to someone else. But it's still very nascent, because I don't think that I'm the only one who finds that it's great to have rights, but it would be even better if I could exercise those rights. But so far, all it has produced is many, many emails and pop-up screens that allows me to tick some boxes. And it is still not there where you find, wow, I feel that I'm empowered. I feel that I'm in control of my data. And I think one of the good things about getting started, where you have 500 million people, is that also you get the market to help you. So you see that's a growing interest of services that are designed with privacy as default, that this is the starting point. There's a renewed interest of sort of more independent services to help you manage your data. And that, of course, only comes if there's a sufficient market size to get these services developed. And it's likely that with 500 million people, it can happen. At the same time, of course, the national authorities are stepping up their game. You probably heard about the 50 million fine to Google imposed by the French data authorities because they didn't comply. I think it's important to get started. And what I hear when I travel is a renewed interest. What is it that you're doing? Also because of the scandals, a number of the companies realize that they cannot do whatever. And this is why the inspiration coming from Europe is a very important inspiration. The second thing about us is, of course, to make sure that what is the same is treated the same way. And one of the reasons why we don't have a Facebook privacy case is that it is seen through a German lens. And the German legislation is slightly different from the European one. That doesn't mean that we will not be looking for privacy issues, but they are sort of in the area between sort of competition law and privacy. And from what I see, it's very important that we build up strong privacy agencies instead of asking sort of competition law to bear the full burden of making these things happen. Because privacy is an independent and in itself very important issue. But it is probable that eventually there could be a case where privacy as a service could be seen also through a European competition lens. But so far we don't have a case about this. The last thing, why don't we have giant European digital companies? Well, one of the reasons are that when the US companies got started, they had a digital single market to work on. One language, very few barriers. So they got started and they gained volume. And when they came to Europe, their services was very good. Only now have we got a digital single market in Europe that will allow also European entrepreneurs to think from garage to global. Instead of keeping or feeling confined to the national market. And the thing is, if you look at the European ecosystems, you find a lot of clever people, probably some of them from here, who have great ideas and form great startup companies, but the minute they are going to scale up, either they run into issues of where to find capital, or they find a very interested buyer. If you, for instance, look at Google, they've been having a shopping spree in Europe over the last couple of years, buying, I think, between 175, 200 European startups. And this is, of course, why colleagues of ours has been working very, very hard also to establish a European capital market. Because if what you need is access to capital, and not just to go to the bank and create a lot of debts, then you only stay in Europe if you can get that kind of capital in Europe. And that we have been lacking as well. So we need the digital single market, we need access to capital, and then, of course, we need curious consumers. So how many of you have tested the French search engine Quant? How many? Oh, yes, very good. 4 people, excellent. How many of you have tested the German search engine Clicks? They're both privacy compliant. They will stop tracking. So advertisers will leave you alone without disabling your phone from working. I can recommend you to test it. When you drive, have you tested the Slovenian navigation system Sidekick? It's excellent. 100 million users worldwide. No? None? No? Next to that fear, we need a little bit of curiosity also as a sprinkle.
She said it all. But I will challenge you on one element. Okay? Margrethe mentioned throughout her reply words that very clearly described that the world is diversified, fragmented, and in order to get a real economy of volume and scale, we need single market approach. The same issues that we identified for EU apply for global scale. Imagine now, instead of EU, the world. I often say, if you figure it out for EU, we are figuring it out for the world. Because EU is the only really diversified, fragmented, this market of many different interests, different nationalities, different local rules. And if we can get it done in EU, we will get it done globally. So if this fragmentation is done, and if you believe what I propose to you, that we are at the beginning of the emergence of new eco-civilization, which will come for the first time from a global sphere, from a global consciousness, as I saw one of the proposals on the board, then we might need to start thinking globally as well, not just regionally, not like EU, like China, like US. And when I had another citizens dialogue, one colleague came to me and asked me, do you believe that we need global regulator? That's a good question. It's worth debating. Because right now, it is true. Europe decided that individual will decide on who owns data. US doesn't have that rule. Yeah? The government has the right to say. So, which way do we want to go? These are the questions we will need to ask ourselves. I mean, I don't have the answer yet, but I certainly are trying to challenge my colleagues to think in these terms and think about it. Do we need a global regulator? Shall we start thinking globally as one global community? maybe the fourth industrial revolution will push us in this direction. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go for another round of questions or comments. Please.
Could you give him a mic,
Yes.
because it's really hard to hear.
My question is on artificial intelligence. So I have two questions, actually. The first one would be, how can we ensure trust in AI in Europe? Because according to latest surveys, only 60% of European citizens have a positive view of AI. But this number is quite tricky because in the Nordics, there is a high trust in AI, whereas in the south of Europe or eastern part of Europe, the trust is very low. And my second question, how can we ensure that Europe take leadership in AI? I mean, in a human-centric AI based on European values. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there is another question here.
First of all, thank you very much for joining us in Bruges today. Since we are an educational institution, I would like to know your opinion on educational programs, higher education, schools, etc. in the world of the fourth industrial revolution. What would university programs look like? What would university graduates look like? What abilities should they have developed? And probably to challenge some of my colleagues here, is it possible that programs become the better, in the artificial intelligence become the better lawyers or the better economists and so on? I think especially the part of the cognitive replacement of jobs might be very interesting here. So I would like to know your opinion.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for coming here tonight. You've mentioned that we have a digital single market. However, if now I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to start up a company, let's say like a streaming service, I would still have to go ahead and buy copyright licenses in 28 member states, or soon to be 27. And this naturally would put me at such a big disadvantage to US competitors or Chinese competitors who just have the single market at their hands, as you've said. Now we've just witnessed a huge copyright hustle, but do you think there are any prospects of going even further towards a truly pan-European copyright framework under the new Commission?
Okay, thank you. I think we
Let me pick up on the first one. Because we need to share a bit, because I am aware of the time. Artificial intelligence, first of all, what is it? It's really confusing. We're at the beginning of this process. So when people are asked about artificial intelligence, I'm sure that 100 people have 100 different views. So it is absolutely necessary to have a public debate to start developing a common language and understanding what artificial intelligence is all about. Commission tried to make the first step. We have a paper out which discusses the core elements that Commission wants to address in the relationship with artificial intelligence. I will not go into details, but we think about transparency, accountability, about agency who will be overseeing all the activities. I know that we were fighting very strongly in order to make sure that in our document it says very clearly that at the end of every artificial intelligence, there needs to be a name of a human being who's responsible for it. Think about it. No matter how sophisticated it is, no matter how systemic it is, how big the system is that we call it artificial intelligence, at the end, there has to be a name of a person, live person, who's responsible for the deliverables and activities of this artificial intelligence. This is worth discussing. Are we right? What do you think? Do we need that or not? But for me, at being a computer engineer and many years spent in Silicon Valley, I have more ethical questions than technical ones, because engineers give us a problem, we'll solve it. Don't worry about it. Yeah? We will. There is nothing engineer cannot solve, but it is responsibility of the society to guide engineers, to give the framework within which we have to deliver. And remember, just recently, they printed from a cells and a tissue, human tissue, a heart that works. They awakened the brain, which was dead for many hours. So, what is life and death? What is the definition of life? These are more, for me, more important questions that come along with artificial intelligence, and they need a broad public discussion. So I count on you. Don't be afraid of it, but bring all the issues on the table and discuss them. And I hope they're not only lawyers who have the future jobs assured. I do hope that there are many other professions that will come and get engaged, not only from a data processing point of view, but from the point of view of integration of this artificial world in our lives, to make them better, to make more room for love and for friendship and for creativity, and really sitting together in cafes and thinking about the future societies. It is us who will decide. Will artificial intelligence deliver this, or it will make this society as a cyber world altogether? So I'm inviting you. Think about it.
But this is also why the internet should be more than avocado toast and dog videos. Because when you have a wonderful tool for discussing things, why is it that most of us go there for comfort? It is very strange. But just Violeta's point, I think, leads to the question of education. Because it shows that we need, indeed, much, much more than the technical education, the STEM education that everyone is talking about. Of course, we need the humanities and the social sciences, the sociologists and the historians and those who knows everything about literature. Otherwise, our debate will, of course, dry up. And this we need because, as said, artificial intelligence will not be any better than what we feed it. The human brain is still the most amazing mystery for every one of us. And I don't think we anywhere near fully understanding how it works. And this is why artificial intelligence is not the brain. It is not human. And I think for decades to come, we will still be much better than any artificial intelligence. That doesn't change the fact that you would want to need artificial intelligence as a doctor to help you make decisions. Or maybe to make, as they do now, sort of simple testaments, wills, contracts that are sort of state-of-the-art, that can find errors that humans would have made. Of course, I don't think one should wonder about that. But I take it for a given that if we want a human society, then we want all the other things that comes with it. But the promise of education is also to be able to broaden it up and give access to many more people. Because obviously there are gifted, talented, interested people, young as well as older, who do not have sufficient access to education. Also, all through life. Why is it that one should stop studying just because one is late in life? A good day is a day where you learn something. And that doesn't stop with your thesis. Taking into consideration the day of today. So I think there's a lot to push. But one of the things I find thought-provoking was, I don't know if it is true or fake, but I read somewhere that in Silicon Valley and surroundings, the nannies, they sign that the children that they are taking care of will not have any screen exposure. That they will play in playgrounds. that they will be playing with balls, that they will be doing things that children have been doing forever. And I think that is a reminder to everyone that real education, getting skills, is something that takes humans to come together. So with all the opportunities of looking at the best and brightest and most amazing lecturers from all over the world, we still need to come together. There still need to be teachers and people to inspire you and people to take care and people to give you direction. We will never just let it go for another screen or another test or another game, because that is not enough. Then we will just be bored. On the copyright, this of course shows why Violeta is so much more clever than me, because starting from the top, the copyright question is left for me.
I learn from the best.
And I really don't know, because we have tried it, but the pushback is very, very strong. Also because we have different systems. There is a Scandinavian Nordic system, which is very different from the more South European one. And there's, I think, a great distrust that a new system or a common system would actually work. That being said, of course, colleagues of ours have been pushing for you being able to clear copyright just in one place and then to make sure that you have them all over for exactly the reasons that you're stating. But I think it's very tricky to create the trust necessary to have a truly pan-European system.
Could I just bring one more topic to your attention? Because I don't want to leave this extremely important discussion just limited to the Data Protection Act. And just one more, where Margrethe is really an expert, that I have to face in my portfolio today. With the appearance of portal economy and blockchains, we have a serious challenge. And these are the early technologies that are used also to support artificial intelligence. What is global, what is local? Where do you pay taxes? Yeah? We have global corporations now who come, offer services, pay a minimum wage to or minimum fee to some of the local representatives or those that deliver the services, but all the profits are taken out. In spite of the fact that the service, for example, in my case, is using our infrastructure. Yeah? For example, I'm not going to say the name, but collaborative cars and sharing cars and things like that with a very specific name that is well known globally. Or where you order your accommodations. And of course, again, we have a very specific company who's really well known. Ask yourself, who do they pay taxes to? Even though these services are using the infrastructure that we built. So here, Commission is trying really hard to create a new ways of taxation, that those that create profits in Europe pay taxes in Europe. Because these global corporations are many times, also due to the support of their local governments where their headquarters are, they don't pay any taxes, which we found out thanks to Margaret's work as well and her team in the case of Luxembourg for McDonald's. Yeah? Oh. And we have many of those. So what I'm trying to bring your attention to is that it's more than just Data Protection Act when we talk about this new emerging global economy. We need to rethink the basic also political and social and governmental structures in order to really be able to sustain our societies, in order to really bear the fruits of this emerging technology. Not because we will not be able to, but because the current systems just are not fit to address the situations in which the societies find themselves. So I count on you, and students of these universities have a very important role to play, because regulators will be more and more important. Regulators will have to deliver a job, will have to make sure that monopolies are broken, that level playing field is established, that we have a fair competition, and that the taxes are paid where they have to be paid. think about it, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we open the round of questions, I would like to ask Rachele to read us the best question from the social media, because some of them have already been put to you from Slido or Twitter. Please, Rachele.
I can read the most liked one. Doesn't know if it's the best one, but let's try. Do you think the decision Siemens-Alstom will change competition law and allow more political influence as requested by Germany and France?
Okay, let's bundle it with other questions so that they can reflect on the answer.
Quite specific one.
Please. So there's a question there and then here. Perfect.
I have the impression that we are looking to the West, but haven't we to look to the East and to the influence of China, where you have, in fact, the cooperation between the economic power and the political power. What's more dangerous than the American situation where, okay, you have these big companies, but they are not the same as the government. But if you have both in one hand, more or less, it is becoming more dangerous. How you manage that?
First of all, thank you very much for your time today. Last week, Google published its Q1 financial results. The company continues to grow very rapidly, despite the fines you have levied. And as you said, Commissioner Vestager, on Friday in an interview, competition enforcement is not just about fines, it's also about changing your behavior. Recent reports from market participants and specifically from BULC show that the changes made by Google are simply cosmetic and not working. And this is harmful situation remains very worrying for merchants, for competitors, but also for European consumers. So you have the tools to be more prescriptive in your decisions, to restore real competition. And so my question tonight is, don't you think that it's now time to use those tools? Thank you very much.
Hello, thanks for being here. We were speaking about the functioning of the fourth, what brings the fourth industrial revolution. I would like to think about what makes it happen. I would like to ask your take on the need for resources that entails the fourth industrial revolution, because it will certainly help improve some processes, allow for circular economy to appear, but the data storage and connecting everyone together will also need important infrastructure investments, and that requires quite a lot of resources. So I would like to have your view on what is needed to ensure optimal sourcing and use of these resources in Europe, and about an eventual competition on efficiency, carbon footprint, and ethics.
How many days do we have? Great question for a long discussion.
Thank you both for coming to Bruges. So when you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, you also talk about having the infrastructure in place to sustain that revolution. And that ties into the debate about 5G. And I wanted to know your perspective on the discussion that is currently ongoing in Europe as to when European countries make a choice as to who will make those 5G networks and sustain this fourth industrial revolution. Do we need to prefer our own European companies, the Nokias, the Sony Ericssons that we have around, rather than Huawei, a discussion that's also ongoing in America? And do you think this is a field where we need more of a European approach rather than a member states, an approach that is driven by member states, given that investment screening is still done on a member state level. Some member states do not have such a screening mechanism like Belgium, and there is now a European regulation, but that is basically more or less the EU giving an advice as to whether some investment is a good idea.
Commissioner BULC.
Yes. First on the Siemens Alstom. As you probably know, if you have a big business deal, you will have to notify it to the Commission. And the first thing we then do is to say, well, if this merger happens and the merging parties then have higher prices or limit choice or stop innovating, is there then someone else for customers to turn to? Because as long as there's someone else you can turn to, then, well, it will just be then bad if they have higher prices, because then they will lose out in the competition. So we ask customers, competitors, regulators, market participants as such, how will this merger affect you? And Siemens Alstom are two European champions, and they also do very well in the global market. They do trains and they do signaling systems. And for most parts, there's a lot of competition. You can choose a lot of different people to do a metro, if you want to do a metro. Anyone? No? If you want to have trams or intercity trains, if your metro is going to have a signaling system, I would recommend that. All of that, you have competition. We had no concerns whatsoever. But in two other areas, we had quite serious concerns. And this was in mainline signaling. And mainline signaling is what keeps us safe when we go by train. And we are very ambitious. We have a European standard. We want member states to invest in order to allow for more cross-border trains, better regularity, higher frequencies, or what makes it attractive to go by train. So it's something that we will invest in for the years to come. And there was a very high risk that there would be no one to turn to for signaling systems if the merger went through. The other question, the other problem that we had was in very high-speed train. Very high-speed trains are trains that goes more than 300 kilometers per hour. So one of the forms of transportation that can actually compete with flying. Because if you have the infrastructure, you can get down on ground. It's a completely different footprint compared to flying. So we would expect that there is a future for very high-speed trains. Here again, is there someone else that you can turn to if the merging parties, they raise their prices or limit choice or stop innovating? And here, of course, we look globally, because here also the question of China is, of course, very important. Can you turn to someone Chinese if prices go up? And here we found that, no, this is not the case. As we speak, there's no very high-speed trains running outside of China, and you would definitely not want them to sell you a signaling system. So when we have these kind of issues, we talk to the companies. We say, we have these issues, how will you solve them? And very often, things are solved. I think over the last 10 years, 3,000 mergers have been approved, and 9 have been prohibited. And this is because we almost always find solutions to make sure that businesses can merge, but customers still have someone else to turn to. But here we couldn't find a solution. The businesses didn't want to solve these problems, and then we are left with no other choice than to prohibit the merger. And then there's been called to say, well, we were in the process of creating a European champion. But in my book, a European champion is someone who is faced with competition, who has someone challenging it in order to be the best. Because what we find in our casework is that it's competition that drives investment, innovation, that drives you to be better. And if you can compete in your home market, you can also compete in the global market. So we prohibited the merger. But one of the things that became quite clear was that just as well as we demand fair competition from businesses doing business in Europe, no matter where they come from, we see that they're not necessarily the case in the global market. So we want to be somewhat more hard-nosed when it comes to global competition. For instance, making sure that if people come and do business with us, we can do business with them. So the Council have started to renegotiate about a tool that we call the international procurement tool that will exactly allow us this reciprocity. Commission has proposed it a long time ago, but only now there was a renewed interest in actually making this happen. To make sure that we get the implementation of the investment screening so that we can see if people come here with the right intentions. To make sure that we make full use of the way we do public procurement here, so that we just don't accept the cheapest offer, but also qualify that offer of the sourcing of materials, of working conditions, of after services, all of that. So you get a qualified bid and not just a question of the cheapest price. And in these few cases where we prohibit a merger, it is exactly for the benefit of European citizens, because otherwise there is a risk of prices increasing. And this is why I find that we have very good service of the very fundamental choice that we want a Europe that is characterized by fair competition. And it was a choice made by our founding fathers, a value choice, because they made another choice in China. They made a similar choice in the US, but with some variation. It is part and parcel of what brought us here today in Europe, having rebuilt our continent. And this is why for me, it's important. Of course, it is awfully technical, challenging, difficult, but the fundamental idea is very simple. And it has worked for a very long time. And this is why I think when we challenge our competition rules, we should do that to make sure that they are fast and efficient and make things work. And this is why it's important that it's not just a fine. Because with a decision for us, if an antitrust decision, for instance, in the Google cases, we say there's a fine because of past behavior. It will be around 4 to 6% of the global turnover of the affected market. And if we win the cases when our decision has been appealed, the fine go back to member states. So I don't even get a small cut. But with the fine also comes the decision to say, stop what you're doing, and you cannot do anything to the equivalent, because now we need to bring the market back to working. And in the first Google case, the one on Google Shopping, what was the case when we took the decision was that no rivals of Google Shopping had access to the shopping box. You could find rivals to Google Shopping, but only on average in page 4 in your search results. Anyone been there recently? Ever? Well, you should go. I keep all my secrets there because it's a safe place. But now, 2 years after the decision, in this shopping box that was completely sealed to rivals, in 75% of searches, you would find a rival, and 40% of clicks would go to a merchant of a rival shopping comparison. This doesn't mean that we are satisfied or any other thought. We will keep supervising how this will develop, but it means that things has changed. But one of the reasons why we still worry is that in the latest Google case, actually Google stopped their illegal behavior by the time we sent them the statement of objection. That is 2 years ago. Now we have a decision, there is a fine to pay, they should stop. But they did that 2 years ago. Problem was that the market didn't pick up. And this is why we're now considering, well, what kind of remedy could actually make competition come back? And one of the things that we are considering is to see, well, could sharing of data or access to data be part of this remedy to make competition come back? Because, to use a metaphor, it would be like having a competition. It could be running. And one of the competitors manages to lock up all the competitors in the locker room. No food, no water, no training equipment, only themselves to argue with one another how they ended up in this awful situation. While the other one is out there, training, water, best trainers that you can find. And then someone comes and say, oh, you've got to lock them out. But that's not fair competition. Because if you've been locked out for so long, you will never, ever be able to make it against the one who has been training for weeks and months with the best possible equipment. And here, of course, it may be a help if you get a different access to the data produced. Because the thing is, you can have amazing technology, you can have the best of algorithms. If you don't have access to data, it will not work as well as an old, worn-out, tested algorithm. So we're pushing it in order to see how can we make sure that competition comes back. Because antitrust law enforcement is not just about punishing, it's also about enabling. Because competition is what serves consumers, and this is what we want. Violeta.
Thank you very much.
You're
Two
welcome.
Challenging questions.
Yes.
I hope you will help me at the end. But no, I don't want to downplay the two extremely important questions. One is related to resources, sustainable development, and how we're going to run the fourth industrial revolution, and the other one is on China. Both of them, we could discuss it the entire day. Yeah, but let me at least offer you some initial thoughts, and let me start with resources very quickly. The fourth industrial revolution is no different from any other. There are three core issues that always need to be addressed. Three resources. One is energy, the other one is raw materials, and the third one is people. Yeah. What I would challenge everyone and inviting you to think with us is that all three will need substantial innovation. Commission has already showed some sort of vision way forward till 2050. On resources, we said the future economical models of European Union should be based on sustainable development and circular economy. Reuse, reduce, then recycle, and of course, all together, find the ways to be innovative and not to depend that much on the resources we don't have. Currently, our economy very much depends on something we don't have. And that's why our economy is very sensitive to what's going on globally. And if I say that for the resources, for example, for batteries in order to push for electrification, we don't have lithium. We hardly own any. Few countries own small amount of mines, but most of it is in the hands of China today. So if we want to be really competitive in this, let's say, sustainable development and electrification or hydrogen or any other renewables-based energy shift, we need to invent technology that doesn't need lithium. So yes, in first place, we're investing in the new generation of batteries that will still have the old architecture, but at the same time, a big portion of our investments will go into a new generation that doesn't need the resources we don't have, if we want to stay competitive and if we want to lead the game. That's one of the examples. The other one is, of course, energy sources. We heavily depend on resources we don't have. Like, for example, only in transport, 93% of all energy or fuels, if you want, are still fossil fuels. You know that Europe hardly has any resources. That's why we're so sensitive to the price fluctuation of energy on a global scale. So we decided, and we have a strong strategy now on the EU level, that we want to move towards renewables, and we want to at the same time address pollution issue. I'll share with you, currently, only in transport, guess how much we have negative externalities due to mostly to the pollution, road accidents, congestion issues. Approximately. What do you think? How many billion euros per year? He's shocked because I mentioned billions. But I will shock you even more. It's 1,000 billion euros per year. Only from transport, only from negative externalities. Imagine that we spend that on education and retraining and everything else. So we have now clear Vision Zero by 2050, and we have a strong, sustainable strategy with this Vision Zero in place, and now we want everyone to help us to walk the path. That is a little bit on these resources and on energy. Of course, we need to develop the energy storage, and that's another big investment now on EU level, because we want to make sure that sustainable renewables can contribute to the electricity grid on a stable level. Because today, you know, when it blows, it blows. Then we have an energy. When it doesn't blow, we don't have energy. So now we are developing the energy storage systems that we will be able to stabilize also the use of alternatives. But the third one, which is human, people, we need to start innovating in our public structures, in our political structures. We need innovation, because it is enough to treat humans as resource. We need to stop treating human as a capital who need to depreciate and appreciate. Yeah? We need to start treating ourselves as humans, as people. And this shift will have to happen in order to have a sustainable strategy, in order to be really fully, as Margrethe mentioned, to have, and as many of you mentioned here, to have inclusion, not to create social inequality, but social equality. For that, we need to understand that one of the biggest miracle on this planet Earth is this body with spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical, and social dimension. So think about it, yeah? And we need to put this as an element, all these elements of the fourth industrial revolution. And then now we come to China very quickly, because this is for us, all of us. There is neither one commissioner in this commission that would not have China on its agenda and actually seriously think about it. For me, China means engaging in connectivity to make sure that we can establish the conditions for trading, that we can establish conditions for cooperation. But at the same time, and this is big way Margarethe's field, and she can fill me in, but it is that we bring China on board on fair competition, on transparency, on public procurement rules, open public procurement rules, and similar. And I'm really proud, and this kind of was not really well covered in media, but a couple of weeks ago, on an EU-China summit, we agreed on all this with China. We have now a signed framework within which we will engage on all these important topics. Is China a threat or opportunity? Of course, China wants to dominate the world. But are we going to let them? It's our choice. So we are engaging with them. We try to bring them to the table, that they understand that only collaboration, cooperation on a global scale can bring sustainable results. And if one thing that they do understand is the need for sustainability, because they are choking themselves. They are really, really polluted country, and they made an enormous effort in order to start walking the path of sustainability. So I'm in the favor of engagement, but not with a naive interpretation of it, but with a strong, clear, market-based rules, negotiations, and of course, creation of level playing field. But I'll tell you something we learned over the last couple of years. There is a lot we need to do within EU. Because EU member states, EU project promoters, ourselves, we need to clear the house. We need to get clear rules inside EU in order to be able to engage on an equal level playing field. For example, if we give to European strategically important projects a co-financing means, I mean, do we want then foreigners to invest and use the opportunity of decreased risk factor and decreased risk factor investments, or can we push them to engage under certain conditions? Of course, that they have similar rules on the other side. This is now the game we're trying to lead. and it's infinitive game. I'm not in favor of infinitive games where you have winners and losers. I want to have a game that never ends, that we all constantly engage with each other and together evolve markets, evolve conditions, and cooperate. As I said, not with naive approach, but with a very pragmatic, rule-based approach. And this is where China is now finally engaging at.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's hard to believe that we spent 1.5 hours together. Time really flies. So this meeting is slowly and sadly drawing to a close. But before that, this is an academic institution, so all performances are assessed. And therefore, the next slide will be about learnings from this citizens' dialogue. Please. So, do you understand the fourth industrial revolution better because of today's dialogue?
It should also have the option that you could be confused on a higher level.
Bravo.
Okay, we said 50 was the quorum, so it's fine. Okay, thank you very much. I think by Bruges standard, this is an outstanding performance. Thank you very much. Let's move to the next question before I give you back the floor for some closing remarks. Based on today's discussion, what are the issues the EU needs to address to lead the fourth industrial revolution?
Speaking about diversity, huh?
Okay, 50 being the quorum, we said. Let me give back the floor to our commissioners for our final word. I will start with Commissioner BULC, perhaps, so that Commissioner VESTAGER can conclude. Please.
I will write all this down because you guys are right. And I see that you are opening exactly the topics that are challenging us. But before I say my last statement, I would like to use this opportunity and invite you to understand what EU is all about. First of all, European Union is a project that is ever evolving and will never stop. This is not a static structure, it's a dynamic structure. It's the structure that is constantly reinventing itself based on the needs out there on the market, out there in the society, out there on the global scale. And why I'm saying that? Because there is a lot of comments out there today when I feel that people think that this is a static structure. That this is something that will never change. And now let's hit on it. We were faced with many different challenges in the last couple of years, with substantial ones. Challenges that EU has never experienced in the last 70 years. In the scale that we had to deal with. What do I have in mind? A refugee crisis? Never in modern history. Europe was a desired place to come. Second, terrorism. Never in the scale that we had to experience. Next, Brexit. Shock, but we never experienced such an important member state to decide to leave. But if that was not enough, Trump came and challenged entire global markets and the relationships and multilateralism that EU very much stands for. Why am I saying that? Because in only 4 years and a half, with these really severe challenges, we realized first that we have no tools to manage them, that there is no agreement among member states how to approach, but we got together and we developed them. Have we done everything possible? No. Will these challenges never appear back? I hope not, but not guaranteed. But what I gained as a commissioner, a confidence that if there is a challenge, we will sit together and solve it. That's what I have and I took out of my mandate for this commission. That's why all these challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, we are not aware of them completely. We don't know what's happening, what will come in tomorrow. But what I'm confident about is that through these dialogues, through the cooperation among member states, through the expert groups, through the cooperation of different portfolios, once we know, and you help us to identify many of them, what the problems and challenges are, we will solve them. And there is, my dear colleagues and friends, currently there is no better place in this planet Earth. I know, than European Union. I know it's hard to understand and believe that, but tell me, where would you move and live? Tell me one country in this world that you would rather move and live in. I want to make sure that with cooperation with you, we will continue to engage and continue to make sure that we stay democracy, that we stay open society, that we have clear rules under which we can engage, and that we can very confidently, with being aware of the challenges and problems that the fourth industrial revolution might bring, we will walk the path and solve them along the way. So, thank you for this opportunity. Keep the vision, hope, and engagement alive. And of course, keep identified problems, because as long as there are problems, we are needed. So, thank you very much.
But Europe is a promise to be kept, and one of the promises was to let you go by 8:30. So we are on borrowed time. One should be very, very well aware of that. And the good thing, and that of course can be tricky because we don't have our commission meetings as open meetings, but I hope that when you see us together and hear us talking, you realize that it has been a commission of people who actually liked and respected one another. And for me, when I was to be the commissioner, I didn't know what to expect, because I've been working as a minister, and in sort of the Council of Ministers, one of the first things you learn is to be somewhat suspicious of the Commission. So I really didn't know what to expect. But the reason why we're here today, not work done, but a lot of progress made, is because that people work together. And this is not a detail, because the most fundamental challenge that we face is the challenge to overcome ourselves and to work with other people that we don't agree with in the first place. And if we do that, then I am completely confident that we can solve every problem on our very long to-do list of things to do. But only if we can make that, if we can overcome ourselves to work with people that we initially disagree with. And that is the amazing thing about Europe, that we have made it so far. And I think one of the most important tools to overcome oneself is to realize what we have achieved. Because Europe was destroyed. physically, spiritually. We had the Cold War, we had the Iron Curtain, and here we are. The best place to live ever in history in a united Europe. That gives room for some confidence, I'd say, that we can make it. And that I would hope to be the message, that this Europe is our Europe. And with the confidence coming from what we have achieved of societies for citizens, of markets for consumers, of technology for humans, then we can also make it in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.